to be clear, the medicine to be potent, and we have slideshows for most of today's presentation anyways. Thank you all. I hear that life be lifing. Likewise. And in the spirit of that, we have set up this 12-week container like the types of therapies that are so valuable to survivors. We talked about not only identifying some of the triggering information, but also bringing resources to that. And so, how we've set up these classes is we'll have one that dumps a lot of the information surrounding, like what we did last time, the red flags, the green flags, the legal advocacy, some of that more intellectual meat. And then we have classes right after that with the plant wisdom. There's a reason for that. It's so that we can bring those resources to the stuff that we're digging up throughout this class. So I just invite us to take that medicine in. Like Mama Michaela was saying, this is meant to be a gentle, nice session with the plants. And Spirit's been really calling me to go ahead and, do a quick prayer for us before opening song today, protection prayer like that. And the song I'll be sharing today is an Ikaro that I have received through dieting Bobansana. And the Amazon, which is an Arcana Ikaro, meaning a protection one for the whole group. Protection for our hearts, for our ancestors, for all the work we're doing like that. So thank you all being here. I'm Brittany Jade Wilson, daughter of Lisa Michelle Wilson, granddaughter of Betty Wilson, great-granddaughter of Clara Faye Wilson, great-great-granddaughter of Eula Faye Wilson. And I call myself into this circle. Spirit, I ask that you walk beside my brothers and sisters here in this work that we're doing together. It's hard. It's a hard road. There's pitfalls, there's bumps. And I see you, Spirit, walking by us, holding our hands, and that each and every single person in this circle, whether they're physically present for this particular class or not, that you come to them, Spirit, in the benevolent ways, in their dreams, in their moments alone, in the stressful times like that, when they're sitting in traffic, when they're frustrated with their children, when they can't feel like they can go on anymore. Spirit, I ask that you send the benevolent memories from their DNA to the surface so that they can value themselves and find those moments of peace and resource within themselves like that. So and this is an Ikaro sung mainly in Shipibo, like Shipibo language from the Peruvian Amazon. The Shipibo is one of the largest indigenous nations in the world with millions of current members. But I'm specifically talking about the Shipibo language from the Amazon and Peru, because there's Shipibos in Ecuador, Brazil, all over like that. And there is some Spanish in there too. So it's mixed, it's mixed.
Kushidiki Arcano, Iki Shaman Ge. Kushidiki Arcano. En la sangre arcano. En los huesos arcano, Kushidiki arcano, Wiki shaman ge. Iki shaman ge, Kushidiki arcano, Kushidiki arcano, Kushidiki arcano. Memoria ancestral. Kushidiki arcano. Kushidiki ancestros acompañar iki shaman ge. Kushidiki ancestritos guerreros. Ancestros acompañan Kushidiki ancestros iki shaman ge.
All right, y'all. Today we're talking about the cardinal directions of traditional indigenous plant medicine making. Hey! um, so thank you, loving the dragonfly. um, so we talked a bit about an introductions. I am what you would call a hood herbalist or an indigenous herbalist or a straight off the res herbalist like that. My forte is not Latin names. When we start going into specific plant allies, which we will cover, over 100 specific plant allies, meaning like mimosa is good for this, bobansana is good for that, yellow prairie flower like this, sweetgrass like that. I will provide you with plant ID slides as we go, and then you'll get a follow-up PDF. So to compensate for the fact that I am not so good, and I'm not trying to be good at the Latin names, to be honest. I enjoy the folk names of plant medicine, and my experience as an herbalist has been largely experiential and through oral tradition and like that. And so this class is dedicated to laying the groundwork for that, so that when we get into our subsequent herbal classes, which will list the specific herbal allies as well as medicine making, we'll learn in this course how to make flower essences, salves, tinctures, balms, pusangas, like that. I want to go ahead and lay the groundwork now so that when we get to those classes, I don't have to keep going back over. And don't forget not to use metal, and don't forget to sing to your plants, because we don't have enough time for that in each class. So let us get into, and this is going to be again, in accordance with the original instructions, to peoples who are indigenous to all continents. I'm not saying to all indigenous peoples, but to many indigenous peoples from all continents. These traditions and practices surrounding the preparation and harvesting of herbal plant medicines, you will find again and again, right? So it's like throughout history, throughout different cultures, and still practiced today. These are kind of some of the cardinal directions or golden rules around really working with the spirit and full energy of the plant in a holistic way to produce powerful medicine, not only on a physical level, but also on an energetic, spiritual level. A lot of the plant medicines we're going to be going over in this course are plant bath diets or flower essences. Some of them are tinctures and teas, and we're, some of the plant allies will be talking about the physical constituents and how they can support our nervous systems and how they can help regenerate us and resolve scar tissue. Very valuable on a physical level. However, the majority of the plant allies we will cover in this course are dedicated to slowly peeling off layers of trauma like that. Um, Something that can be very jarring for survivors is to go, for example, to maybe an ayahuasca ceremony, or take really, more intense doses, heroic doses of tinctures like that, and go move too quickly too soon. It's not always good in that way. And so I found that flower essences, flower baths, while I may not use them much as a midwife, for example, like in an emergency situation, I need to get the right plant with the physical constituents. When I'm working with survivors, I find them to be highly effective because it works in the grandmother way. So in general, and this is not listed in the slide, so just, but in general, the first, I would say, cosmovision or oof, north compass of traditional indigenous medicine making is going to be working in a grandmother way like that. Effective healing that works long term, especially for us who have PTSD, complex PTSD, um, who have survived a lot of trauma or in our lineage. It's going to be more effective long term to work in the grandmother way, which is like this. If we have a bad herb, a mala hierba in our garden, an invasive plant in our garden that's eating up all our vegetables, we can choose to go in there and plow it down with Miracle Grow or dig into the soil and like rip it out. Or we can choose to observe and slowly, and this would be a slower option, slowly work our soil, mix in that diatomaceous earth, mix in that ground up quartz crystal, mix in that tobacco and cayenne powder, fill our garden with so many healthy, vibrant herbs that there's simply no space for the parasites anymore. All the grandmother healers I've been fortunate enough to work with, even the ayahuasqueras, which ayahuasca can be quite intense, they still work in that way. There is no, I have not witnessed, for me personally, those who follow the grandmother path like that coming in with a healing ceremony and just attacking whatever quote bad demon you have, or sickness that you may have. What we go in and do is sing to the benevolent parts of you, sing to the resources of you so much, so that grow the resources inside of you so much that there's simply no more space, right? There's no more cracks for those demons or bad spirits or negative thinking, whichever way you look at it, to come in anymore. So let's start with that. As Rihanna says, let's start there, okay? um, and and yeah, just keeping that in mind, because you know especially as a survivor myself, I can speak to the feeling of feeling impure, feeling like I want to take something out of me, feeling like I want to take the scar tissue out of me, this experience out of me. But what I have personally found to be so effective, as well as with my clients over the past couple decades, is yes, we are identifying the trauma. Yes, we are. And that's why you're going to have resources, and you're going to leave this course with the legalities and all those things and the therapy list. However, we're identifying the resources, right? And we're just flowering those up. We're working in relation with the plant spirits to flower up the benevolent qualities of their lineage and of that person, so that simply they themselves are empowered to step out of that cycle, to rewire the brain in that way, which is very empowering lifelong, and also works on that power dynamic that we talked about last class, right? So we didn't mention this one, but I would say also red flag, right? Practitioner who comes and is like, and we did talk about it some with the language, like I couldn't have done it without you type of a feeling, when they're coming in and doing something to you with plants. That can also feel very invasive for survivors. So let's start there. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so step number one of the cardinal directions would be set the space. So when we're setting the space, we talked about checking our baggage at the door, using sound to check our baggage at the door, I believe in our first class, and in any way that is relevant to you setting the space. This includes cleansing off any tools that you're going to be using to make your plant medicines. I personally like to smudge them off, but it could also be physically to sterilize your stuff. You don't want bacteria in your medicine making tools. Cleanse the actual space you're working in, the room. Specifically, if you may have had other clients, other ceremonies, it needs to be clean, right? We want a clean slate when we're making medicine like that. And also checking our own baggage at the door. So singing, smudging yourself off, sea salt, bass, pusanga, flower essence, whatever works for you in that way. Yep. And the reason for that being is we're trying to make a neutral space. We're trying to create a neutral space to allow space for the spirit of the plants to come in. That's what the intention is before we sit down and make herbal medicine like that. So rather than us going in and taking something out of the plant, right? Like taking the vitamin K out of the alfalfa in a tincture because we know best and we're going to get the constituents, and I'm a Western herbalist. Um, instead of that, we can, which that's fine too, I guess, in some ways, but also we can choose to work from neutrality and remain curious about the plants still continuing to teach us what they have to offer like that. Because it's surprising, as sometimes I'm preparing plant medicine for someone else, and every person's, each relationship with the plant nations is unique. I don't have any ownership over my client's relationship with any plant medicine at all. I'm simply here being a facilitator, same way as if I were like, hey, Michaela, meet my awesome friend Elise. I don't have ownership over their relationship. That's something all their own. And I'm frequently surprised by, when I sit down to make medicine, plant medicine, and truly set a neutral space. Say I'm preparing it for a mama who's pregnant and I'm preparing her a plant bath, and maybe it's rosemary and white roses or something. That's something I would typically use. And I've worked with those two herbs since I was literally, like, I don't know, my whole life, but I can specifically remember making medicine with them since I was 10. Right. And still today, though, decades later, I can have new information from that plant come through, new constituents come through in accordance with the relationship of those plants and that person, if that makes sense. So that's a main motivation for wanting to set the space, is to allow space for the full spirit of the plant, that's which is ever evolving, just like we are, as well as to not bring your own juju into the medicine like that. All right, next slide, please. Mm. Oh, yes, I forgot. I threw some of my poems in here. I like poetry, if you can't tell. um, and this one speaks to that neutrality. So this was something I wrote while making plant medicine in the early morning. It's in the darkness before dawn, while sipping on a hot cup of silence, make peace with everything, including who we are, were, or wanted to be. So in that sense, just explains again what I was just talking about, which is past, present, and future, the 4 directions, the 7 directions, just setting it aside and living inside of the medicine wheel, living in your center while you're setting the space and while you're making plant medicine like that. Okay, next slide, please. Oh yes. Oh my gosh. I love plants too much. I'm like blooming cactus flower. um, so gather only after giving back. In Western holistic herbalism, this often appears, for example, in the wise woman tradition, which was coined by Susan Weed, who I'm not telling you to go study with her at all. I'm just that her teachings have become echoed throughout the holistic Western herbalism community, and the wise woman tradition is echoed at a lot of herbal conferences and predominant herbalists, and often is reiterated as ask permission, is what I've seen, like Rosemary Gladstar, Susan Weed, a lot of other prominent holistic westernized herbalists say the ask permission part. To me, as an indigenous herbalist practitioner, I kind of look at that and I'm like, oh really? Because like, are you for real gonna like drive 2 hours to go harvest bush sage and then like ask permission and hear a no and drive back? Like, has that ever happened to you once? Like, for real? Maybe it has, I don't know. But for me, and the way that I've learned is like, if we're out there, obviously we're already at the point where we have intention of medicine making. So my thing, rather than asking quote permission, is to just gather only after giving back. Some of the best ways that I like to give back, number one is, and I saw this echoed in a lot of y'all's ethical pillars, is the sustainability. Okay, so number one, when harvesting in general, leaving the seeds, leaving the smaller leaves, when we're harvesting mushrooms, leaving the mycelial network so they can still grow, or tapping some spores on the ground before we take the mushrooms. That's a great way to give back. Sometimes when I'm harvesting rose medicine, I'll like with my hands prune the rose and leave the dead organic matter at the base to give back. That's a one, you're giving your time. Some practitioners really like to leave their hair. That's a part of us that has our DNA, our biogenetic information. Menstrual blood, I know Mama de la Maiko has some wonderful teachings, and I've seen some of her beautiful videos about free bleeding, and I'm definitely an advocate of that and have been on that path since I was a wee bleeding thing. And just such a powerful medicine. I know Mark our only identifiable as man in the group? I'm not, I know we have, is there yeah, okay. So not Mark, not to overgeneralize for you, but just, it's a special gift that we as women have to go ahead and give back in that way, to give back of our nutrients like that. And pee also, and spit, and yes, I see some comments popping up in the comment box. Yes, they're naturally, it's a cycle of nature, it's meant to be that way. Our poop, even, composting our poop and giving it back and composting to the plants, it's, imagine waking up in the day and you do a good compostable poop and like you're done with your purpose for the day. Like, done, check, I'm fulfilling my purpose as a human now. I like that. And all of those, products that naturally come out of our body are meant to nourish the soil in that way, are meant to nurture the earth. Some of them need to be diluted, some of them need to be alchemized, but they all have information. And a beautiful thing about giving back of our bodies like that, the spit, the pee, the poop, all of that, the hair, it has that biogenetic imprint. And so what practitioners see a lot is it opens that conversation back up between us with the earth. So for example, maybe you like put your pee outside. With pee, just FYI, you do want to dilute it so that it doesn't burn the grass. You know, you'd have to look up, that's a whole separate class, like regenerating the soil and all. But for example, if you're like diluting your pee and putting it in your garden for a certain amount of time, say you have chronic liver ailments, you know, suddenly you notice that dandelion is popping up in its place, perfect for the liver, like that. I also saw, I mean, the earth hears us regardless. The earth hears us and all of her creatures. You know, it's my firm belief as a practitioner. For example, I spent a good amount of time in the Butte County area recently in California, which was like where the Paradise campfire happened a few years ago. You know, the one that Trump was like, they should have just raked better, raked the leaves. That one where the whole town burnt down. Yeah. Um, I was there a lot. Yeah, that's where I gave birth to my last three kids over the past few years. And it was crazy to watch. And of course natural, but I'm just every day in awe of the wisdom of the plant cesters, how where it was all burnt, what was growing back was just this really potent, vibrant, some of the biggest like mullein and yerba santa I have ever seen, which like lung medicine, boundary medicine, dehydration medicine, like that. And St. John's wort, that was the other one, like nervous system support, right? Because there was like a lot of animals and humans who had major lung damage and major PTSD from being burnt up like that. So in that sense, when we're giving back and with our bio information, so our spit, our blood, or anything like that, we're opening back, we're facilitating a more clear and coherent conversation. Because I am a believer that even though we're living in this toxic modern world, the earth still hears us in the same way that we would hear our toddlers who are frantically buzzed out on sugar. You know, we still like know them and love them. But when we're getting back in sync with some of our ancestral practices like that, it just facilitates a more clear and coherent conversation between what our species and our community needs for our bodies and what the earth can give, like that. um, some other traditional offerings to give before harvesting would be tobacco, you know, fish, you know, and fish meal is very traditional to bury under the plants. That was some of the information that some of my indigenous relatives made the mistake of sharing with our homies who came over on the boats a few hundred years ago. Yeah, so giving back in any way like that. Also, don't forget about giving back to organizations, you know, if as long as you know they're ethical organizations, you know, which is kind of hard to do nowadays. I would just really do your research as far as that goes. But or families, you know, when in doubt, I like to just identify, that's what we're doing with the eco-sensual training, is identifying actual one family at a time, right, who preserves plant medicine, like that. So giving back to people and organizations who are preserving, reforesting, especially when we start talking about the ayahuasca, the peyote, the mushroom nations, or any of the plant nations like white grandfather sage, which are highly over harvested and take a long time to mature and are being culturally appropriated. So don't forget about giving back in that way. Um, yeah, I think that's self-explanatory. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, another poem. Here we go. Okay. I hope you can give me a thumbs down or a sad face if you're not into the poetry too. um, So this one was inspired. These are all poems that I wrote, like being inspired while making plant medicine. That's why they're here. I saved my love poems for another day. No, I'm just kidding. This one speaks to the process of giving back before you harvest and what can be received during that process. So we're not only giving back, we're not only opening that clear and coherent conversation, but we're also able to, again, open a space to receive messages directly from the plant nations, which is a beautiful process. Between every blade of sweetgrass, there is the whisper of those who inhabited this land, earth remembering those who have left their offerings and loved nature as their own flesh and blood. Beneath every stone, there is a story of how we came to be here and why. Ancestors teaching those who now have human bodies and have come here to try their hand at untying the knot. So yeah, that's just like taking the pause after we give our offering to let any new information come in. That's the pause I'll often receive specific information, again, specific to whoever I'm preparing the medicine for, like that. Okay, next slide when you're ready. Gather only what you need. So we had setting the space, don't take without giving back. And a lot of these are just the original instructions for humanity in general amongst many indigenous cultures, but specifically to plant medicine as well. So gather only what you need. So what does that look like? We live in a capitalist consumer society that's been hell bent on over harvesting and disrespecting, it seems. And you know, to build right relationships with the plant nations in that way, we need to look at truly what we need for plant medicine and what we need to sustain ourselves. I realize that some people see it as a business model, and I love that because it is all hands on deck for the plant nations right now, and we desperately need the healing. And I'm a firm believer that the spirit of the plants want to be used for that healing. They come in our consciousness and are like, use me, cultivate me. Like I feel strongly that like marijuana, soy, corn, tobacco, like some of the big heavy hitters that are growing all over the world definitely got into the humanity's mind at some point. You know, many of these plant nations have been with humanity for so long, and there are plant cesters. They have been here long before the humans have. So they also know that the way things are going, the more we cultivate them, the more we value them, the less chance there is of them becoming extinct right now. So um, in that sense, they want to be used, and I realize that. However, we just need to be mindful of what our communities actually need, what we really need for medicine, what we really need to sustain our businesses, and then that goes hand in hand with the don't take without giving back, which we just went over. So if you are an herbalist who goes on to, for example, like make tinctures and sell them, or make some of our pusangas that we're going to learn about and give them to your clients, just checking your sources, making sure, are they over harvested, what's going on there, you know, going back to giving to the organizations. If you're not personally going to reforest or replant or regenerate the medicine that you're using, then making sure that you support those who are, and like that. And in general, um you know, not taking too many of the flowers that the bees need, you know, to make their honey, being mindful of a holistic environment in that way, that they're part of a whole food chain. um in general, and this isn't a hard rule, but I've always been taught to take no more than 1/4, me personally, but it could be even less, you know, even less. Each practitioner needs to find their own way with that. But like that, you know, again, with when harvesting mushrooms, psilocybin medicine or other medicinal mushrooms, making sure to leave the mycelium intact. um this is just a personal thing, but I always think it's really sad to like harvest flowers who haven't fully bloomed yet, because I'm like, just let them bloom. um like that, you know, being mindful and interacting with the plant to not take the babies and the elders, and look at the whole system that the plant's growing in to make sure that you're not disrupting the whole kind of ecosystem around it, like that. Okay, next slide. Oh yeah, this is my favorite one. Sing to the spirit of the plant nations. So we cover a lot of work about sound in this container. We talked about that a little bit in the introduction about how everything, and really on a scientific level, what our ancestors have known for a long time has now been confirmed by science. I mean, science is ever changing, but is it's starting to converge and overlap a lot with ancestral wisdom, which is really exciting because it opens conversations with different populations. And you know, it's now backed up on all levels that really our whole reality is made up of light and sound. To me, as I see it as a practitioner, and please, you know, hopefully hopefully I don't sound too schizophrenic saying this, but um to me, literally, I see it that way when I'm singing a song, or a singing to the spirit of the plants, or perhaps in a healing session like that, singing in a sweat lodge. I literally am seeing the threads in a person's or in a group's tapestry, at least as I see them, without trying to project into it too much, but I'm just letting the vision come to me. And the vision that comes is generally like a tapestry, literally, of light and sound, with different threads of light and different threads of sound. And when we sing, we're actually adding material to those threads. So when we see, for example, a hole in someone's tapestry, a knot in someone's tapestry, a broken, a tattered piece, the sound waves actually can act as material, like as wool, if you will, or as cotton that is literally being spun into the broken parts. No, because the healing, and this is part of the grandmother healing way, is that, which is very, very appropriate for survivors, because it's very gradual, it's very all encompassing and very self empowering like that. Um, it's in the grandmother way, it gradually, we don't just want to go in and see, oh, like, oh, there's a knot in the tapestry, there's a hole, it's broken, like, let's fix it. Like, no, it's just like, I'm noticing, I'm seeing, I'm noticing, I'm seeing, I'm being neutral, I'm lending medicinal sound and plant spirits and new material that's healthy to be woven into those places as that person or as that plant sees fit, if that makes sense to everyone. So I'm putting out that material in the space, and their spirit or their ancestors or their plant medicine is able to then relate with that and weave it into their own tapestry, if you will. And so it's so important. It's so very important for healing work. Any facilitation, to me, whether it's a 20-minute phone call with someone, or a birth, or an ayahuasca ceremony, a massage, whatever that is. It's so important to have that sound element. And you'll see it again and again throughout our human history, whether that's going to be chanting, Tibetan bowls, musical instruments, didgeridoo, healing, medicinal songs, ikaros. It's invariably present. I would say, with the exception of silent meditation retreats, which of course is an awesome DMT trip all on its own. Um, but frequently it's found throughout indigenous cultures and our history in conjunction with plant medicine making. And so when we sing to the spirit of the plant nations, um, there's different ways to approach it, like there is with everything. You'll leave this container knowing for example, we did the cedar smoke song last week that had me all choked up, that had me all cleansing at the start. That's one of the cedar spirit songs, one of many, of infinite, just like your soul has infinite songs. I can't pretend to know all of Mama de la Maiko's songs. Like, I don't know, she could keep receiving songs all the time. Same thing with the plants. And so you can learn specific songs that's like, okay, this is the cedar smoke song, I'm singing to the spirit of cedar, the cedar song, while I'm making my cedar bundles. And you can also, like the ikaro I shared today, receive songs from the plant nations to sing while you're making that medicine. One of your practices is going to be, throughout this course, to do a plant bath diet for yourself. And that's the main purpose of that. I believe it's during our integration session. I do believe it's during then that I gave us that quote. I don't really love the word assignment, but that practice to explore. And my idea for putting that in our break was twofold. It was like, one, to give y'all something to integrate and to hold you in that space and to help protect and cleanse and explore while we're on our sacred pause. And also, at that point, we will have talked so much about singing to the spirit of the plants. Now you have these different songs, and a plant bath diet is a beautiful, beautiful way to start receiving your own songs from the plant nations. Your own song sounds weird too. That's ownership, but whatever, songs that your relationship unfolds for you like that with the plants. So a lot of this singing to the spirit of the plant nations can be more linear, like I said, where it's like, no, we've had the cedar smoke song for 19 generations and we sing it when we make our bundles. And it can also be intuitive as well. And having both is really good. Having both is good. Like, I love to have some of the more water cleansing songs when I'm running the lodge, more sweetgrass songs when I'm running the lodge, and I like to stay open for what spirit moves through like that. And yeah, we will be practicing that together. And the idea is that you leave this container with a bundle of your own songs that you can memorize if you feel called, as well as practices to unfold your own and receive your own songs like that. Okay. And oh, one more thing about that. Yeah. So those are the different types of ways. You can also, some people are really into the sound healing. We will hear when during our class singing your medicine, we will go more in depth about how this works, and we will have a couple of guest speakers here from Peru. I'm going to have a couple who's traditional indigenous Quechua and a couple who's Peruvian mixed descent, who practice sound healing and make their own instruments for sound healing. I'm not a practitioner who uses instruments a ton, if at all, in my healing. So I want y'all to hear from practitioners who really know how to potentize instruments to incorporate sound for the plant spirits like that into their medicine making. So you will hear from them, but also another great option. Some of us have a lot of there can be a lot of healing work done just through accessing our sound, and we'll get more into that, how that applies to survivors and your voice and finding your voice in that way. But I don't want to leave out how potent it can also be for those of us who are more into the instruments and the sound healing as well. The bells, the campanitas, the rattles, the swooshing of the dry leaf rattles that I can still hear from the Amazon, the ceremonial drums, the bowls, all like that, all work lovely for potentizing the medicine. And why we want to do this is the purpose is to, like we said, bring in more material to the tapestry that we're actually trying to provide to heal, make it whole again, but also to, again, provide space for the spirit, the whole spirit and energetic matrix, if you're not that spiritual, or energetic blueprint, if you're more scientific, the full molecular structure to unfold in its fullness like that, and create more space from it, and just make the medicine as potent as possible. That's the first purpose. The second purpose is also so that when we don't have that medicine, I did mention this with the cedar smoke song, I believe, that sometimes you may have built a strong relationship, for example, with rosemary and the spirit of her, and you've received songs, but you're now at a very hard birth and you're in the hospital, or you're in a domestic violence shelter or a prison, or you just don't have it. You're stuck in traffic. Who knows? It's an emergency, or it's winter time and you haven't harvested, any. Then you have these songs that you can also bring in the energetic blueprint of that plant spirit to cleanse the space, to heal, to provide material for whatever tapestry you're working on like that. So this is a poem about that, about the purpose of singing to the spirit of the plant nations. Treat every drop of medicine as though it were your last. Potentize the spirits of the plants by singing a clear and whole medicine song. Make this process with every drop of medicine you create, especially the ones for yourselves. That last point's more for me. It's like, yeah, take your own medicine, bitch. Just take it. Sorry. Anyway, I'm like cracking myself up. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Use tools which are not made from metal. Now, this is a more fringy one, as far as definitely more traditional like that. But again, these are original instructions that I have found are not with every single indigenous culture ever, but by and large, the vast majority. You'll see this again and again throughout history and currently, and in living indigenous cultures on all continents, where it is seen and believed and known that metal cuts the spirit of the plant. That's why. Okay. And when we look at metals, and let me just start by saying, like, again, I'm barely making it here today. Like life is lifing for me too. Do I use metal pots and stuff for my plant medicine at times? Of course I do. I'm not here to judge. It's not like, oh, I did the singing and then I did this and that. And now I'm messing it all up by using a metal pot. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is just something to keep in mind. It's just something to keep in your back pocket that we're going to experiment with throughout this course, especially when you're at more the beginning phases of a relationship with a plant nation. It's again creating that neutral space that's not cutting the energy. Um, and it allows more information and more potency to come through like that in the medicine. Um, so what's it called? Oh yes. So why does the metal cut the spirit? Why does it? When you look at metals, okay, not only are they taken from the earth in a bad way. So let's start there. Okay, let's start there. Um, Healing in the grandmother way and a traditional indigenous lens like that, many peoples don't even think that it's right to be using metal tools to cultivate or drill into or take from the earth as though she were a resource. Many cultures view that, and I view that as raping the earth. Again, I'm not saying I don't eat off of metal forks. Yes, I do. I'm a mixed person. That's what it is, and I'm ever evolving like that. But I still see it in that way. And any metals that are going to be made into pots or knives or scissors nowadays definitely are, we can almost guarantee, sadly, not taken in a good way, in a mindful way, and very much so in a raping way, raping the earth like that and mining her for resources. So especially when we're talking about serving survivors, and wanting to create effective safe healing space for survivors, we don't want to be incorporating any tools that are bringing similar actions as the abuse onto the earth, right? We talked about that in our first class, our orientation class, about this work being exactly the same, not metaphorically but literally the same, advocating for reproductive wellness of humanity, advocating for survivors, for the healing of sexual and reproductive trauma, is the same thing literally as healing the earth, as healing a spring. Not to say go dump toxins in either one, but they go hand in hand in the same sense. It's like, okay, I untied this small knot in my tapestry of the scar tissue that I have, say in my left testicle or whatever it is from, or my anus from being raped like that. And then also that same small knot is untied in the energetic blueprint of the earth. I mean, we are the earth. Humanity is earth becoming conscious of itself. That's what sets us apart. Um, and our own stupidity, of course. But with consciousness comes stupidity and the concept of stupidity. So, um, so that's one of the base principles of not using metals, especially when preparing plant medicine for survivors. In general, they're not used in traditional indigenous cultures regarding herbalism because of the base belief and knowledge that it pulls the energy. Metal is a conductor. It pulls energy. It pulls heat. It's cold. It attracts energy to it. It stores energy. You can literally physically feel metal doing that, right? And so the common knowledge behind that that's observed is it's cutting the spirit, aka it's dándole un choque, aka it's pulling the energy, it's taking the heat away, it's taking the vibrancy away like that. It's sterilizing, it's depotentizing in that sense. I will say there are exceptions in traditional indigenous Asian herbal medicines. I'm not a TCM, a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, but I do respect them highly and know that it's a very, there are many herbal lineages in the East that are just highly evolved and haven't been broken for thousands of years. And they do incorporate metal into certain formulas for certain, for example, for like a metal type imbalance or this or that. But it is even within that culture, I've come to know, done in specific ways to balance out certain things. And they also have ceramic crock pots for boiling, for long boiling their formulas too. I just love that when I found out, because I would say like the Eastern herbal medicines is what I'm least versed at. I'm more versed at North and South and traditional indigenous herbalism in Europe and Africa. I just haven't traveled that much in Asia, but I have conversed with enough practitioners and delved enough in it to learn that, and seen them making their formulas like that and been like, oh yeah, like that's like, you have your ceramic plug-in pot and you cook your herbs for 24 hours, and that's what I do with my ceramic pot that I'm doing over the fire, just like that. So you know at least trying to cut out the metal contact when forming, especially when initially forming or when serving survivors with the plant nations, can be really key, especially if you were going through this process and maybe feel like you're hitting walls with the plant nations, where you're like, okay, like I'm doing my plant bath diets, I'm receiving some information, I'm a well-versed herbalist, I'm doing all this stuff, and yet like I just am not really getting it. I'm not saying that not using metal will just like ding solve your problem, but it could be like a simple little like, let me look at that. Like, let me just explore that for a bit. We do have the homework also before your break of finding at least one tool that's non-metal and one receptacle that's non-metal for when we get to your plant medicine making portion after break, which is very exciting because you're going to leave this course with your new medicine song bundles, your actual physical herbal bundles. And so we're inviting you to go ahead and explore making medicine without metals. Some great uh, alternatives to that are for the actual receptacle. You can use a clay pot, like a tempered clay pot. That's what's generally used here in Peru, where I am, olla de barro, like that. Um, a crock pot, just a non-metal lined, like ceramic lined crock pot is a very easy find. You can find them at Goodwill, so it's not like elitist or something weird or like another thing you have to buy. Easily get them secondhand. The great thing about the crock pots or the hot electric hot pots is that you can really control the temperature quite well with your medicine making. So if you're doing long-term formulas, if you're doing bottom steams, which we're going to learn about, aka like yoni steams, but I like to say bottom steams because I've done them with all genders. Um, and that can be really useful, right? To be able to control the actual temperature like that. Um, like I did mention in the traditional Chinese medicine, they do have these just very freaking fly looking ceramic pots with all of their medicinal characters written on them that you can plug in and make herbal formulas with. Um, Certain cultures have used bladders as well, like animal parts or bladders or hides that have been tempered enough to actually be held over fire and heat up water and other concoctions like that. Um, yeah, so those are some alternatives. And for as far as cutting, like so for processing, so some alternatives for tools that aren't metal for processing. So when we're thinking about pruning, we're thinking about harvesting or grinding or whatever, the actual processing of the plant matter. Some traditional non-metal alternatives could be a obsidian, agate, or other rock stone nation type tool like that, making your own. And it doesn't have to be, crystal or anything like that. For me, that's actually a new concept. I did not learn that in the sweat lodge I was past or any of the healing traditions that I've done. Yeah, so for processing the actual plant medicines, yes, a stone. I have never learned to specifically use crystals, especially not ones that were processed like using chemicals in China, or again, mined from the earth. Yeah, that's not healing in the traditional indigenous way. So, stone medicine, the stones that I work with most as medicine are, the lodge stones, river stones can often be used. Stones that have been tempered by the river, by the ocean can be just beautiful for healing. They're so pure, they're so cleansed. Like that, and other going on a journey to actually like ask the earth, what stone medicine would you like me to use? And then that's how you can find sometimes your like knife that you're gonna chisel down into a nice little thing that you can use for cutting your plant medicine. Or that's how you can find your stone that you're going to make into a mortar and pestle, as another traditional indigenous way to process your actual plant medicines. And mortar and pestles, they're getting really fancy nowadays. Like they have like quartz ones and they have this one and they have that one. They have ceramic ones. But but here in Peru still, just even for mundane herbal use, like straight grinding garlic and oregano for the soup, for the caldo, it'll just be straight a rock on top of a rock. Okay. Because that's the OG mortar and pestle. Like you can buy a nice one and all, but you can just make your own one over time with just like a nice old rock that has a natural hand grip on it against another rock. And over time, the more medicine you grind, it'll slowly become a mortar and pestle. Like that's the old way to make them. Those can be really useful when we're talking about like roots or piri, which is something we use in pusangas a lot here. Bark, any type of plant medicine that's going to be rougher and harder to grind, right? That you might otherwise be doing in a food processor, like a straight big rock on rock. Another less commonly used one is dried fish tongue, especially paichi from the Amazon. Um, that's where I learned how to use that. But it actually can work with like any larger fish. They tend to have these like spiky tongues. Okay, so if you, I mean, I know not for everyone, just like I know that like, okay, not everyone's going to go get like a bear bladder and use that as the receptacle. But for those of you who may be practicing in a more traditional way like that, um, any larger fish, you can, and this goes to using every part, and not taking more than you need as well. If you take the tongue right after harvesting the meat and all and actually dry it out in the sun, because it's spiky after all of the meat, like once it's just the bone structure or cartilage structure, there's no more meat on it and it's totally dried, just like you would dry, I don't know, the part of the feather that was attached to the bird or a bone like that. You can also use salt to process it quicker like that. It will become a natural grater. Okay, so it's very spiky, so it becomes a natural grater. Also very useful if you're working with like barks, if you're working with piri, if you're working with root medicine, dried medicine that's just really hard to cut up without metal. That's something that I've seen traditional indigenous cultures use still to this day. Like the maestras, where I learned that from, was dieting ayahuasca in the jungle and learning how to make the plant bass and everything in the pusangas. Like we're going to learn how to make, because the base of the pusangas in the jungle frequently, not always, but was piri, piri, piri. It's a beautiful plant spirit that is a very hard, like bulbous root. And the grandmas that I was dieting with for sure were not using metal when they were making their plant bass or anything like that for us. They did use plastic, and we'll say that quite a bit. But for the actual processing of the plants, no metals. And so they use the paichi tongue or other fish tongues to grate that piri because it's a very hard dried root and it's the base of a lot of their pusangas, especially the love potions. It's like the big love potion one, the piri. And piri actually has dozens of relatives who grow all over the world. In the United States and the Southeast, I grew up knowing that root as a rattlesnake root, and you can like dig it up and eat it. Um, yeah, so that's good. Yeah, and those are some alternatives. So like what? So we did mortar and pestle, the fish tongue, the stones. Oh, bamboo. Bamboo is wonderful, natural, affordable, accessible, naturally antibacterial. And we did talk about, yes, we're spiritual herbalists, but also, or whatever, energetic, holistic herbalists, but also, in that set the space step, we did need to cleanse physically our things. We don't want to be leaving bacteria in our medicine, because you can be as energetically aware as you want. And if you're not sterilizing your tools, you're gonna get some bacteria and mold up in there probably. And we don't want that. So yeah, bamboo is wonderful, regenerates quickly, and naturally has antibacterial, antifungal properties. Bamboo can be wielded very easily and quickly into like nice little scissors or knives. Is used a lot, and more of the Eastern traditions for umbilical cord cutting, for plant medicine making, like that, because it is so sharp and because it does have those antibacterial, antifungal properties like that. And there's other ones too. But that's just like to name a few. Moving on, I believe this is one of the last points of the cardinal directions of indigenous plant medicine making. We are at working with the whole plant whenever possible. So this is going to add to this is going to add to working in a holistic way with the environment and with the seasons that we're living in. Of course, this information is going to be distinct depending on if you, for example, are living in a location where you enter into a hard winter. Yes, do we make our vinegars and tinctures and honeys and cordials to save through the winter and preserve our medicines? Yes, we do. And in that sense, we may not always be working with the whole plant medicine. Essential oils have their place. It's my firm belief that all parts of the wheel make a whole and every part has its place like that. Um, However, just like the metal, whenever possible, without stressing out about it, working with the whole plant. And this goes to working in that traditional indigenous way where you're part of the earth and not on the earth, where you're hopefully growing the plant, harvesting the plant. I would say to walk with your bare feet whenever possible while working with the whole plant as well, to receive and participate more fully in that coherent exchange of information between yourself and the plant nations. And having that whole plant, again, there are plant cesters, and I'm taking this phrase from Azula Jade, who was one of our students, but also is just such an awesome herbalist over in Indiana, who runs urban farming and rewilding for women of color there. I love that plant cesters, and it's so true because they've been here for way longer than we have. And who are we to say that we know which constituents are more effective, or that those constituents should be separated or taken out from the rest of the information package? That's like me meeting Michaela and being like, oh, well, I really love that you're good at business, but I'm really not down for like the conversations that make me feel uncomfortable. So let me just like take these parts of you and fragment them out. Like same thing, right? We're no longer allowing information to come through. We're working in a stagnant way when we're working in a set way with the plant nations, where we feel that we have dominion over them to know what's best in that sense. Again, everything has its place as modern medicine as well. Um, just as far as really wanting to make a potent, accessible plant medicine that's going to be very effective for survivors, and working in that grandmother way with healing layers. Working with the whole plant is wonderful because they come in this perfect package. An example I like to give is sugarcane. So sugarcane, when you just eat, like, I don't know if y'all have had the pleasure as children of like just gnawing on some straight raw sugarcane, but it is delicious and awesome. And it feels like, at least to me as a child and still now, feels like almost deliciously rebellious, like, hey, this is so sweet, but it's also healthy. um, and very primal in that way. And the sugar cane, when you chew on it in that way, has many constituents, but one of them is that it's very high in chromium. Okay. And chromium is exactly what one of the main minerals that helps regulate blood sugar and the glycemic index. And so, right, but humans and our thinking that we know best have come in and separated certain constituents out of the sugarcane plant. And then we have diabetes coming on, then we have high blood sugar coming on. Why? Because we took it out of the whole plant package, we took it out of its whole wisdom. um, it has that energetic blueprint for a reason. And it's my firm belief that while we may be getting positive effects, as herbalists in certain areas, for example, taking the vitamin K out of nettles in a tincture, that's what, the constituent we're really trying to get out of it. Um, we may be losing a lot of other constituents along the way that are much more subtle and that help deliver the information and the nutrients of that plant and the energy of that plant in a way that where it can integrate into your system in a healthy way. And so there's that reason for working with the whole plant whenever possible. The other reason is for, again, accessing the spirit of the plants out of respect, out of fortifying and forming your own relationship with the plant nations like that. Um, you know, it's more advantageous to be working with the whole plant. Some of my favorite ways to prepare, and when I say working with the whole plant, I'm talking about when we get into making our flower essences, when we get into making our pusangas, making our salves and balms and tinctures. You'll walk away from this course knowing how to do those things. And I encourage you to use the whole plant whenever possible. Again, without stressing yourself out, please. This is not like a rigid judging the self thing. But when we get to that point, I will encourage you to use fresh whole plants. If you can't, that is fine. Some other wonderful ways to experiment with using whole plants and incorporating whole plant medicine into your practice as an herbalist is making an herbal bed. So this has been done, I mean, for depending on how long you think human history is based on your cosmological beliefs and who's funding the scientists near where you live. um, uh, this has been done for tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of years by humanity, and was debatably one of the first ways that we incorporated plant medicine was just whole plants, straight making beds and pillows with it, straight harvesting eucalyptus leaves, mullein, tobacco leaves, freaking cattails, other plants that are naturally fluffy, delicious for our skin, but also antibacterial, antifungal, anti-parasitic, naturally propelling fleas and other bugs that may have gotten into, for example, caves, and we're just cave people like that. Um, making plant beds like that, just on a practical level. Nowadays, you'll see like a buckwheat pillow is just delicious, the lavender pillows, very medicinal, regenerating, a wonderful way to receive plant medicine, especially during dream time. Um, you know, Ceremonially, we also see plant beds being made like that. So for example, when I attend, when I'm honored enough to attend the Sundance, I'm not a Sun dancer, but I frequently attend as a supporter. Something that we'll do, even if you're a supporter, just smoking the pipe, or I'm usually cooking. So if I'm like going up and like surveying food to the supporters, even coming near the circle at all, they'll have me, walk on a pathway of white sage. They'll have you like stand on a pathway of white sage bush and sweetgrass when you're holding the pipe like that. And it's blessing and cleansing and clarifying your connection with the earth and the sky like that. It's blessing your path. That's some medicine that we also work with when we talked about the ancestor offerings, and offering like the flowers to brighten their path into the spirit world. You'll see that, Dia de los Muertos incorporates that a lot with the making the pathway with the marigold petals like that. But you see it throughout indigenous cultures, making pathways or walkways or beds of plants like that, to cleanse, to bless, to protect, to restore, to regenerate, and also to forge the way and bless the way for like that. Um, Other wonderful ways of working with whole plants in your plant medicine practice can be making your own smudge bundles, which we're going to do together as part of your medicine making thing. So you can walk away with a non-culturally appropriated smudge bundle, that's not white grandfather sage, that's really over harvested. Um, Making smudge bundles is just wonderful, for working with the whole plant medicine and really calling the spirit of that plant in. And I also think speaks to how effective it is to use the whole plant medicine, because still to this day our smudge bundles are made by whole plants. There are some that are like burnt down charcoal, but to me they don't really work the same like that. Smudge bundles, plant bass, we'll go over plant bass during your medicine making class. Wonderful to use the whole branches. I like to be sitting in a straight stew. Okay. I know that that's not going to be accessible for everyone, and we may end up using like satchels of herbs for some of our hot baths or our bottom steams, but whenever possible, using just whole branches and whole flowers is beautiful, beautiful process like that. Also using the whole plant in the sense of, I find as an herbalist that when I'm at conferences in the United States or Europe, teaching or learning like that, I see a lot of the time that, again, that stagnant, I feel like it's like a stale, stagnant way of viewing the same plant over and over again, and kind of going to like, oh, this plant, we harvest the flowers, take the aerial parts at this time of the year. And no, and then I see like herbalists, like supposedly holistic herbalists, mind you, arguing with one another about like, no, man, you need to boil nettles for 15 minutes, not 20. And it's like, using the whole parts of the plant, not always going to the same part of the plant. Maybe you're used to using like the leaf of the nettle, but looking to the root, looking to the bark, the internal bark, looking to the seed, looking to the flower. And what a beautiful practice as an herbalist to be able, for example, to make a plant bath or pusanga, which we'll learn how to make, which incorporates a flower, a seed, a bud, a piece of the root, a piece of the bark, so that it's a holistic plant experience. And that way, keeping in mind that it's all safe. Of course, there's exceptions, but the herbal allies we're going to incorporate into this training are largely nutritive and tonifying. We do feature some heroic herbs, and I'll tell you when we go over those herbs, I'll be like, oh, use with caution or check with your main care provider. But most of them are just nurturing, beautiful herbs that that humans are safe to use all parts of the plant. And each part of the plant is going to hold a different medicine in it, or a different potency, different reflection of that same medicine, different resonance, that again is all part of a package. So using the whole plant like that. Also, depending on what time of the year you're harvesting, if you're in a country where or lands where it's really cold, then a lot of the medicine has gone down into the roots during that time. And so, you'd want to use that. Or, something that I see is heavily overlooked as well with Western holistic herbalists is bark medicine. I would say most of the majority of the herbal remedies I was lucky enough to learn in the Amazon living there, the most potent part was like that internal, I forgot the scientific word, post it in the chat if you know it. It starts with a CE. I just can't think of it right now, but it's that internal, it's not the bark, but it's like that internal kind of like goopy layer in between the bark and the hard part of the tree. And that's some really potent medicine. And they're like scraping that off. Heavily overlooked, I find, by Western holistic herbalism like that. So yeah, working with the whole plant whenever possible, and your teas and your baths and your plant beds. Dream satchels, medicine ambulance as well. We're going to make our own medicine bag together with herbs. And so you can make your own herbal amulets. This is a traditional practice to do, during the new moon for protection, during when you're bleeding time, if you're a woman, like that, you can just it's like making a small smudge bundle, but then we might bundle like some animal medicine or mineral medicine in there too and put it in our little, oh, thanks. Michaela dropped it in the chat. Thank you. Thank you. It wasn't CE, it was C, but it was C, right? It starts with C. It is the layer just under the bark. Thank you. I told y'all right off the bat, if you want an herbalist who's good at those words, I'm not the one. I'm sorry to disappoint. Yeah, like that. Just use the whole plant whenever possible. If you are living in a nation where you have harsher seasons like that, then you can also, don't count out, there are wonderful grassroots herbal organizations and small businesses that are also dedicated to like using the whole plant, not taking without giving back and things like that. So keep that in mind too, so that, we're giving these to you as general guidelines to practice as much as you can and experiment with, but not to pressure you or make you feel that your herbal practice is not good enough. That's not the point here. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, that's just a pretty picture of Bobansana. It's just for fun. This is Bobansana. She's one of my favorite plants for healing sexual and reproductive trauma. I would say perhaps the patron, Mimosa and Bobansana, some of the patron plant healers for healing sexual and reproductive trauma, but we'll get into that more with your herbal allies talk. I just wanted to throw that up there because it's pretty. And I do have, before we go, I do have a couple of things that I wanted to include from last time. So this speaks to just a couple of points that I feel that I left out in and all of these topics. Like really, we could do our whole own 12-week series on each of these topics. But they're important points that I wanted to make sure got in there from our last talk about the red flags, green flags thing. I wanted to talk about the energy of jealousy and competitiveness. So we did speak to this some as far as power dynamics go, red flags, looking out for um, the way that your energy feels when you leave a person's presence. They may be talking all the good talk. They may seem like their star is shining bright, but yet you find yourself feeling less than, or uncentered or disorientated when leaving their presence or when in their presence. We talked about it some, but didn't really specifically talk about jealousy. So I would say, and shamanic healing 101 is when we're working with spirits, human spirits, otherworldly spirits, plant spirits, anything of that nature, when we're working with the energetic tapestry of existence, we want to look out for jealous energies and jealous spirits, okay? Because that is the idea of ownership. The idea of ownership is a colonialist mindset. It is living on the earth. It is living on the earth and not with the earth. That mindset of owning land and not being the land living, right? And so when we translate that into any sort of healing practice or any sort of spirit, again, whether they're a spirit inside the person you're working with or an energy of a practitioner, when we're seeing jealousy, and this can be reflected in different ways with your intimate partners, it can be reflected. I frequently see with practitioners, oh, you can't work with them because blah, 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 blah. Like a practitioner telling, like, and it can be very subtle. Even massage therapists, it can be like, oh yeah, they're really good. We went to school together, but like she didn't really take the sports training. So blah, 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 blah. But meanwhile, you're like, well, they're my best massage in town. Now you're leaving with second thoughts, right? Um, I frequently see this with ayahuasqueros, supposed ayahuasqueros, especially down here in Peru, indigenous and non-indigenous alike, who get into this whole trip where it's trip pun intended, where it's like, oh, now that you've dieted with me, you can't diet with another practitioner for like 2 years or 7 moon cycles, and we need to like keep doing this many practices or this many things. And it can be as direct as that, like I'm forbidding you, as though someone can actually forbid you, but they're trying to forbid you from working with other practitioners. It can be that direct, or it can be as subtle as talking the other practitioners down, like on a more subtle, constant basis. So just like little comments here and there, like, oh yeah, she really got off the path. Like she was really strong, but she had those 5 kids and haven't seen her around ceremony like too many years. And I know Michaela's laughing because I have 5 kids, but this is actually something that I've heard said about another ayahuasquero mama who's freaking awesome, Mama Manuela Mawa, who's one of the only people I personally would diet with. And she is just one of the best. I've heard a gringo ayahuasquero practitioner being like, yeah, she used to be good, but when she had those 5 kids, she really like got off track for a while, like that. It could be like little comments like that. And let me put it to you like this: when you're the jealous spirits, like, okay, and I don't want to offend anyone right now, but whenever I see any religions, okay, where the main deity or the main great spirit or the main etherical energy or whatever it is, the main ideology is, I am the only way, I am the truth and the light, there is no other way, and anything that is not me is the devil, that's a big fucking red flag. That should be a very big red flag right there. Like as far as traditional healing and shamanism 101 goes, if you were working with any spirit practitioner, client, partner who is like, it is only me and me forever and I am your everything, and if you have anything else that's bad, that's a big red flag. Which we do see frequently throughout the Judeo-Christian religions. I mean, that's why I don't want to be too offensive here, but I mean, it is kind of crazy that like even if you're learning like shamanic healing through Carolyn Miss or something that's very much more new agey, or like crystal shamanic healing, it's still going to be echoed again and again that you don't want to be wheeling and dealing with jealous spirits who are trying to like capitalize on your star power, right? Capitalize on your energy, smeagol you to themselves, okay? Like my precious. That's going to be a bit red flag there. So that, and then asking something in exchange for something else, that also should be a red flag there, okay? And that goes kind of hand in hand with the jealousy side of things, because why? Now, as traditional indigenous herbalists, we are not taking more than we need. We're not taking without giving back. We are perhaps not charging for our ceremonies, but hopefully having people who are coming who are willingly giving what they have, because they know that the more they give, the more they'll get out of the ceremony, because they want to support you, because your community needs your medicine. Having someone bring an offering to a plant spirit, or bring an offering to a practitioner, or bring an offering to a client out of the goodness of their heart, because that's one of their ethical pillars, is pure hearted and is good and is amazing and is necessary for effective healing, in my opinion and experience. Now, the practitioner or the spirit that supposedly is going to be doing the healing, right? Saying that they need something in exchange for something else. Frequently, this shows up in the traditional healing communities as, you'll be initiated to higher levels, or you're special. I can give you certain information that only I can give you, but I need this thing in exchange. That thing could be your sexuality. That thing could be your emotion. That thing could be, I don't want you to work with other practitioners. That thing could be, I need $5,000. Uh, I know that in the more new age shamanic healing traditions, that is seen, that was a big red flag for me when I had friends start going to some, not all of the trainings, but many of the more new age, quote, shamanic soul retrieval trainings that I've heard of participants coming out of. Their main way of, quote, retrieving those parts of the lost soul is by exchanging a crystal. Okay. When we're wheeling and dealing with spirits like that, like, I would say we don't want to be incorporating that energy into our practice, especially not for survivors. Why? Because the energetic blueprint of sexual and reproductive trauma frequently incorporates that vibe of like, it's only me, or I need this in exchange, and then like, you're going to be my special person, or you're my special girl, but this is what I need in exchange. That has that very ownership, um give, like, tit for tack, I need this in order for that quality. And again, not to like drive it in too far, but very surprising that the Judeo-Christian, the Judeo-Christian, the Abrahamic religions, especially Christianity, not only is it a very jealous God, but also it legit is asking something in exchange for eternal salvation, which is your soul, which is your actual soul. Okay. So that would be a big red flag. Sometimes they're asking for sexuality, sometimes they're asking for exclusivity, sometimes they're asking for crystals, sometimes they're asking for your soul. And any time that someone's asking, or an energy's asking for, they need something in exchange for something else, okay, which is distinct from you offering it from the goodness of your heart, that's a red flag. So I felt like I didn't incorporate those very well into the last class, and I definitely wanted to make sure they got spoken on like that.
Thank you so much for that. And I wanted to also maybe this the cardinal directions of herbal medicine making really centers our relationship with like engaging, harvesting, how to do that exchange in a beautiful and reciprocal way. And I also always have like this question bubbling through constantly around what does it mean to be in relationship too? And how we can be in visiting plants and seeing plants and not necessarily even have the inclination to want to harvest. And recognizing that relationship doesn't start with consumption, especially with entheogens. And that's something I like to teach a lot of people is like, people will say something to the effect of, I really want to try mushrooms, for example, but I'm like, not, I don't know if I'm ready for like a full journey, or, I don't even think I'm ready to microdose, or I really feel drawn to or called to this plant, and I don't know if I'm ready to consume. And I think for me, that's just kind of this framework that a lot of us are forced to operate in, that like the only way to know, or the only way to start a conversation is by consuming. And for myself, there are a great many plants that I think transmit their teachings, their healings through different modalities, like these songs that get shared. And maybe someone's never smelled cedar or smelled cedar smoke, but like can hear that cedar smoke song and like feel the presence of it without ever having to, you know, take it into the body or you know, smell the smoke of it. So I just kind of want to open up the possibility that connecting to plants can look a variety of ways. And I, you know, like to just see plants on my walk and sometimes just like maybe run my hand over or sit next to them and just speak or just smell and just be in the presence of them without having like any inclination to want to take a piece off. So just wanted to also just share for the people that, you know, maybe feel called to some of these other medicines that they don't have access to per se. I found that, you know, sometimes listening to the songs associated, looking at these beautiful pictures helps me really connect to, and, you know, asking to see them in dreams sometimes too, or just visualizing them connecting with us as well. So I just thank you for allowing me to share a little bit of that because I think, especially with entheogens, those journeys can low-key be destabilizing for people sometimes, especially that are dealing with crisis, but they could still receive the benefit of feeling that medicine in their presence by just maybe having a mushroom on the altar or a mushroom candle, or, you know, bringing the emanation of their energy into a space without having to eat them at all. So yeah, that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great point. Thank you. And I kind of missed that point when talking about working with the whole plant. I mean, we talked about it in conjunction with singing to the spirit of the plant when she's not there even. But yeah, I'm so surprised at how many humans I've met who are quote dieting plants or activating, doing plant initiations. And I'm like, really? Well, how many times have you like just sat under that tree? Like, okay, you've dieted Bovenson 10 times, but can you identify it in a forest? Have you just going sometimes and sitting, you know, at the base of a tree, in a garden? You know, that's how I personally have received a lot of my medicine songs. And and paying attention when doing so to the potent, again, having the privilege to observe that plant and their natural state throughout the seasons, where you can observe what time of day or night is the most potent for that plant. Okay. So if I'm trying to vibe out with some morning glory, because I'm not trying to do, for example, an LSA trip with the morning glory seeds, but I still want to receive some of that awesome medicine. And I'm not even in a place where I want to be harvesting it because I don't have time to make physical medicine from it. A wonderful thing to do could be go sit out on the full moon, um, when the morning glories are fully popping out in the moonlight, and have some dream time, you know, for example, or the mimosa tree, which is going to be one that comes up big for us. It's all over North America, originally from Asia. Her major times of day is the morning and the evening, but especially evening. That's when her flowers pop open. She's so fragrant, which is also a time of the day when survivors can tend to have a really hard time frequently. And so just going and like, yeah, just chilling, meditation under the tree. I mean, right, the Buddha story resonates with that as well, like at the base of the Bodhi tree. So thank you for offering that as well. Very important. Okay, it's time to close up. So we'll close up with the same arcana, like we said at the beginning. This is a Arcana Ikaro, meaning a protection song that I've received while dieting here in Peru. It incorporates words from the Shipibo, the Peruvian Amazonian Shipibo language, as well as some Spanish words in there. And it's singing to the protection of our ancestors, protection from our ancestors, protections in our blood and our bones, and the moon and the turtles, and the ancestral memory activating like that in a good way. Arcano, Kushi Diki Arcano, Shaman
Kaya kaya arcano, kushiriki arcano. Ancestral, kushiriki ancestral. Kushiriki ancestros. Ancestros acompañar. Ancestritos guerreros, Kushidiki America, Diki Sita America. Ancestros acompañar, Kushidiki Arcano. Arcano acompañar, Kushiriki Arcano, Arcano acompañar, Iki Shamange, Iki Shamange, Iki Shamange, Kushiriki Arcano acompañar, Kushiriki Arcano, Netia Kana Pontepo, Kaya Kaya Pontepo, Kushiriki Arcano, Arcano acompañar, Iki Shamange. En los huesos arcano, en la sangre arcano, memoria y ancestral, tortuga y arcano, arcano antiguo, arcano acompaña. Netia ponte callabo. Iki shamange, iki shamange, kushitiki arcano, arcano acompaña. Shitiki médicos, plantita médicos, arcano acompaña. Kushitiki shamange, kushitiki Kaya kaya arcano, ancestrito arcano, ancestros acompañar, kushidiki guerrero, memoria ancestral, iki shamange, arcano acompañar, arcano antiguo, kushidiki arcano. Arcano acompaña Iki Shamande.